Viridian, The Green Guide, by Clouds. My head in the clouds not coming down. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 54. Gratitude. Summary. Izuku visits Inko's coworker. Izuku was quiet, and Inko hated that she didn't know whether that was normal for him or not. Her Izuku, the one she remembered from when he was little, before he was diagnosed and everything went wrong, that Izuku was always talking. He was always rambling about something or another, usually heroes, and had the spark in his eye that Inko loved, but over the years things had changed. It was so gradual that she had hardly noticed, but looking back now, it was obvious that he'd stopped rambling as much. Instead of talking for hours without hardly breathing, he would ramble for a few minutes, then clamp down and apologize for annoying her. Instead of that sparkle, Inko never wanted to repeat seeing him as empty as he had looked when she picked him up from that school with a broken arm. Getting him out had helped some. He'd thrived in his new classes, blowing through them like they were nothing, and there had even been some times when he'd rambled to her without immediately shutting down. His new friend had helped too. Inko still hadn't actually met Kaminari, but she was hoping that Izuku would be confident enough to bring him home someday soon. At this point, Inko probably knew just as much about Kaminari's quirk as the boy himself did. Quirks were one of the few things Inko had noticed that would reliably bring Izuku out of his shell, which was why it was so heartbreaking that Izuku was being so quiet today. He would normally be fascinated with a quirk-related challenge like this, but today he had only given short answers, and then only when Inko had asked him a question, and he hadn't started rambling even once. Inko hated it. Izuku pulled at the sleeves of his new Eraserhead hoodie again. He had spent most of the short time since Inko had pulled him out of his room playing with a string on the sleeves, and any other day she would have been tempted to giggle and take a picture of the way he had cocooned himself inside it. All right, she was still tempted, but if Izuku found the hoodie comforting, Inko was sure she'd have plenty of other chances to fill her camera role. She was curious as to why, if Izuku had specially ordered the hoodie, he hadn't gotten the correct size. The hoodie practically swamped him, almost like whoever made it had thought he was a few years older than he was, but it made it easier for him to disappear into the fabric, which seemed to be exactly what he needed right now, so Inko wasn't going to question him on it. She was just grateful that he had found something to comfort him, even if what he found was just a hoodie. If he would just trust her enough to tell her what was wrong. Inko shook her head and finished tying a ribbon around the cookies. It was going to take time to rebuild Izuku's trust in adults after what his old school had put him through, and forcing him to confide in her would probably do more harm than good at this point, especially since she still hadn't managed to get Izuku to open up about the details of how his teachers had treated him. The best thing she could do for her baby was be patient and give him plenty of opportunities to come to her. Why was being a parent so hard? Inko forced a smile and turned to Izuku. Ready to go? Izuku nodded quietly and stood. Inko's eyes widened in surprise when she realized he was moving to take off his hoodie, and she hurried to stop him. Why don't you leave that on? It's a bit chilly outside. It's just here much, right? It's nothing to be embarrassed about, even if Eraserhead isn't as popular. Izuku looked at her strangely and shrugged, but left the hoodie on, which Inko decided to count as a win. She had no idea why he tried taking it off to leave, but she wasn't about to let him leave behind the one comfort item that seemed to be anchoring him through whatever he was going through. And she wasn't lying. Lots of kids wore hero merch, and if anyone had a right to wear merch from lesser-known heroes, it was Izuku. He'd been learning everything he could about them since he was a baby. They were silent as they rode the train. Izuku looked at the windows and tried to keep his eyes from straying to the tallest buildings. He knew what Mom was doing. She was trying to get him out of the house, even though it was the last thing he wanted to do right now. After all, if he never left his house again, then he'd never be able to accidentally hurt someone again. He wondered if Kohaku had had a family. She must have, right? Kaminari had said that she was a couple years older than them, if Izuku remembered correctly, but she was still a teenager. She still had parents, friends, classmates. Would they miss her? Would they say that she had already been gone by the time she died, since she had been possessed by Queen Bee for so long? Did that even make a difference? Would they ever forgive? Izuku shut down that train of thought quickly. He didn't deserve anyone's forgiveness, especially not the forgiveness of the family of someone he'd gotten killed. So there was no point in wishing for something he could never have. He'd learned that lesson the hard way after 10 years of wanting to be a hero. Mom checked her phone before ushering them off the train, and Izuku froze as they left the train station, and he saw the cones and hazard tape cordoning off one of the buildings on the street. The diner looked different during the day. Mom paused and looked at the crime scene. I wonder what happens. Izuku gulped and forced himself to shrug and keep walking. Mom sighed and followed. She'd probably been hoping to pull him into a conversation, like she'd been doing all day, but Izuku hadn't read the hero news this morning. Not that he didn't know what had happened, but he didn't know he was being so quiet today. Normally he was a lot better at faking it, but today there just didn't seem to be a point. Sure, he could pretend to be happy, but he'd actually been happy for the first time in his life, and it had apparently upset some kind of cosmic balance in the universe. So why should he even try? It didn't take long after passing the diner for Izuku and his mom to reach the destination. It wasn't a large house, by any means, but it put the Midoriya's small apartment to shame. Mom had barely even knocked once when the door swung open to reveal a girl Izuku's age with long green hair and a white mouth. She looked them up and down, but Izuku couldn't read her expressions well enough to tell whether she liked what she saw or not, which made him shrink further into his hoodie. Why had he let Mom talk him into this? You must be the Midoriyas, she said bluntly. Oh, you're Barry's oldest, aren't you, Asu-chan? Mom seemed just as discomfited by the girl's expressionless eyes as Izuku was, but she took it into stride. I'm Inka Midoriya. I work with your mother. Is she here? Call me Tsu. Tsu, apparently, turned on her heel and headed back further into the house, leaving the door open for them to follow. Izuku shared a glance with his mom, and she gave him an encouraging smile as they took off their shoes and went inside. Mom's doing a lot better, Carol, Tsu said, leading them down the hall into the kitchen. She's planning on returning to work as soon as she can. She gets lonely, Carol. I can understand that, Mom said kindly. It's just Izuku and I at home, but Barry is always so kind at work. It just hasn't been the same without her. Izuku nodded along politely with the conversation, but found himself getting distracted by all the windows. He hadn't noticed from the outside, but the Asuyu home had far more windows than a typical house. Was it an aesthetic choice, or... Are you staying out the windows? Tsu asked suddenly. Do you want to leave? Well, no! Izuku jumped and stuttered as he tried to justify himself in any way that would be more polite than, yes, I want to leave, but was looking at the windows for unrelated reasons. I was just wondering about the windows themselves, because Mom said that your family all have frog-type quirks, so I was expecting things like water features. Not that you have to have those, but I guess frogs sunbathe? Izuku winced awkwardly, but Tsu surprisingly didn't react to his word vomit beyond a polite nod. Or maybe it wasn't surprising. The frog-like features probably made it difficult for her to emote normally. If he were fighting someone with that quirk, could he use it to his advantage? Izuku pinched himself and forced his mind away from his vigilantism. After last night, maybe he didn't deserve to save people. Izuku always loved quirks, Mom volunteered. I even asked for his advice on how to modify the cookies to better suit your family. Mom, Izuku hissed, too many memories of people reacting poorly to his analysis coming to mind as Asui blinked at them. Really? She didn't seem put off, but then again, Izuku didn't know her well enough to read her yet. She turned to Izuku, who couldn't help freezing like a deer in the headlights at the sudden attention. What modifications did you make? Well, Izuku tugged on the ends of his hoodie again and glanced at Mom, who smiled encouragingly. Nothing much. I mean, I know that most frogs are carnivores and that insects comprise a majority of their diets, but we didn't really have any of those at home. Well, not ones that are for cooking, and I know it can be a sensitive subject, and we didn't want to offend you if you don't eat like frogs, which is entirely valid, but, Tsu tilted her head. So, they're just normal cookies? Izuku deflated. Mostly. I mean, we added some nuts and protein powder because we figured that the frog work would require a little more protein in the diet than a standard human, so... That's so thoughtful, a woman's voice croaked behind them. I mostly use cricket flour here, though. A little more robust than wheat flour, but still wonderful for baking. Beru! Mom lit up with a smile as she strode toward the woman and gave her a hug. I'm so glad to see you up and about. How's your husband? Gamba's fine, Beru answered, gesturing for them all to sit at the table. I was much more affected by the attack than he was anyway. Toads are a tad more resilient than frogs. She gave a croaking laugh. Izuku couldn't breathe. He recognized her. There had been a lot of people that ran past him during the New Year's disaster that he distinctly remembered thinking, that woman has an aquatic quirk. I need to focus on getting her out of the fire before dragging her out of the bar. The man with her must have been her husband. He'd saved them. So, this is the son you're always bragging about? Barry turned to Izuku and frowned. Do I know you from somewhere? Izuku's eyes widened in panic, and he clenched his teeth together to avoid falling into an incriminating mother-storm. He hadn't even thought about the possibility that he would come across someone he'd saved in real life. And of course that had to happen on the day he was wearing his Eraserhead hoodie. He remembered Barry being pretty out of it when she'd saved him, so there was a good chance that she wouldn't be able to place him, but her husband might be able to, unless he was too distracted with everything else going on to pay attention to the random vigilante. Would they tell Mom? How would Mom even react? She'd be heartbroken. Mom probably has pictures of me in her office, right? Izuku chuckled awkwardly, and frantically thought of any way he could do damage control in the situation. Like she said, it's just her and I, and I've been told I look a lot like her, so that's probably it. Barry looked at him for a long moment, and Izuku held his breath before she nodded resolutely and took one of the cookies. Yes, you do. That must be it. So, Tsu said you're recovering well? Mom asked. I'm glad. I just can't imagine being out on a date and finding yourself in the middle of a villain attack like that. It was definitely not how I would have chosen to spend the night, no? Barry said bluntly. It was terrifying the way that a single villain could take an entire city block hostage like that. And then when Endeavor arrived. Barry shivered. Well, I almost wish he'd left the whole thing to that vigilante. At least he was no danger to those around him. Izuku sank down slightly in the seat. She might think that now, but she'd only seen Viridian in one fight. If she knew that the vigilante that saved her was just a quirkless kid pretending to be useful. He could have done better, Tsu piped up. Tsu! Barry scolded. What? He could have. Tsu shrugged. He used himself as a target, which made it harder for him to save people and get them out. Izuku hadn't thought of it that way before. He knew that if he died too quickly, then he wouldn't be able to save people, but he wasn't sure if he knew how to fight in a way that didn't make himself a target. Wasn't that the only thing he was good for anyway? I'm sure the kid is out there beating himself out over it and figuring out how to do better. A man, Gamma probably, considering that Izuku thought he looked familiar, walked into the room and immediately grabbed a cookie and bit into it. Shouldn't you be more worried about preparing for the UA exam? Oh, you're applying for UA? Izuku turned to Tsu. My friend is applying too. Maybe you'll be in the same class. I have to get in first, Tsu said. Well, I've been training even harder since Mom got injured. The heroes arriving should always make the situation better, not worse. Izuku nodded frantically in agreement and glanced around the table, which is when he realized that Gamma had been staring at him like a puzzle that needed to be solved ever since he'd spoken up. Izuku shoved half a cookie in his mouth and tried his best to disappear farther into his hoodie. Gamma, that's Inko's son, Izuku, Barry said quickly. He looks just like his mother, doesn't he? That's why I thought he seemed familiar at first. But Dad hasn't met Midoriya's son, Tsu pointed out, so it shouldn't matter that they look alike. Gamma's eyes brightened, and he gave a booming croak that was probably a laugh of some sort. Nah, but it is interesting. Izuku wanted to disappear. It seemed like everything was just conspiring against him to make today the worst day ever, and now the only thing he needed to make it even better was running into Kachan or having Kaminari text him saying that he didn't want to be friends anymore. He let Mom engage the family in polite small talk for a half hour. Izuku had about 1.5 million questions about the Azuy's quirks, but for some reason couldn't find the motivation to ask them. Finally, they were interrupted when the front door slammed open and 2 grade school age kids raced through the house. Cookies? The boy grinned wildly and grabbed one. Awesome! Samidari, be polite, Tsu scolded. You can at least tell the Midoriyas if the cookies taste good. Oh yeah, Samidari spoke with his mouth full as the little girl with him grabbed. They're amazing! Mom laughed. Well, I think that's our cue to leave. Thanks for letting us drop by. Anytime, Barry smiled. You and your son are always welcome here. I'll walk you out, Gamma offered. He slammed his palms down on his thighs before standing and walking them back down the hall to the door. He waited politely as the Midori's put on their shoes, but right as they were about to leave, he put a hand on Izuku's shoulder to hold him back. Izuku flinched and looked back, not knowing what to expect. Had he said something rude? Had they not liked the cookies? Maybe they were allergic to nuts? No, that was illogical. They would have said something. Still, there had to be some reason why Ganma was staring at him like that. It seemed like his wide eyes were staring straight into Izuku's soul as he spoke softly. "Thank you, son." Izuku froze. "What?" Ganma grinned widely and patted him on the shoulder. "You know, for the cookies. They were amazing. You'll have to get the recipe from you sometime." "Of course!" Mom returned Ganma's smile, and Izuku numbly followed as she ushered him out the door. Somehow, he didn't think Ganma was just referring to the cookies. Ooh, Ganma knows or suspects that Izuku is Viridian. Oh my god, yay! Well, not yay for Izuku, but yay for us. Anyways, guys, it's the 6-month anniversary of this podfic. So, it's really crazy. It's been half a year. And, we're not even halfway through. Chapter 60 is the halfway point. There's 160 chapters. Yeah, not 160, 120. But, yeah, it's crazy that I've been doing this for half a year. And thank you all for being here and listening to these videos, and also just listen to me ramble at the end of this. So again, thank you all, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!